Hello and welcome to Autology, the podcast that brings you the latest insights into automotive technology. I'm your host, Phil Amsrud, Senior Principal Analyst for the Automotive Semiconductor Research Area here at S&P Global Mobility. In today's episode, we're excited to have Tzahi Swisa, Senior Vice President, Production Programs, and Dan Galvez, Chief Communications Officer at Mobileye, joining us to dive into some really cool advancements in automotive tech showcased here at the 2025 IAA Mobility Show. Mobileye has been leading the charge in innovation. We can't wait to explore the leading edge technologies that are shaping the future of mobility. We'll chat about the impressive progress in both hardware and software, including those all-important end-to-end solutions and software-defined vehicles. Plus, we'll look at Mobileye's roadmap for the system-on-chip hardware and software that are designed to boost vehicle performance and safety. As we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of electric vehicles, we'll also discuss how new architectures like separate domain controllers, zonal architectures, centralized systems are being influenced by the shifting EV roadmap. Welcome, Tzahi and Dan.
Thanks, Phil. Good to be here.
Hey, Phil, thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Our pleasure. Thanks, guys. So 2025 are shaping up to be years of big announcements, including the Volkswagen launches with Mobileye. Is this a critical phase in the industry to demonstrate the maturity and value of ADC solutions then?
Yeah. So maybe I'll start and then Dan can complement. So certainly I think we are now entering a period starting, let's say, late 2026 and forward towards 2027. Which is going to be very interesting in general, and also specifically for what's coming from Mobileye. So we are essentially coming out with two very important products towards, again, late 2026, which both are, on the other hand, other ends of our product portfolio. On the extreme end, what we call level 4 or eyes-off, hands-off solution, the robotaxi solution, which is coming out with VW ADMT, planned to be launched again during 2027, and then scaling in terms of more geos, more ODD, things like that. So this is one thing which is very significant. And on the other end of or let's say the lower end of our product portfolio, we also have what we call the supervision, which is our hands-off, eyes-on system, launching with Porsche. So it's kind of like a pincer movement, I would say, almost for Mobileye, coming out with those two products. One, which is level 2++ in, let's say, the old terminology or the old taxonomy. And on the other end, we also have the level 4 solution. Now, despite being on different ends of the product portfolio, they are both very much feeding from one another, in a sense that all the development and validation phase of the level 4 system pretty much feeds from what we're doing on the level 2 plus, and vice versa. So this is really going to be interesting, both in terms of scalability and also what it will offer to customers. On the robotaxi side, we already know what the benefit of robotaxis, because we basically have, let's say, enough evidence from other places, from other projects and competitors that are now operating. So this is going to be exciting. It's also going to be new in the sense of where it is going to be deployed. Starting from the US, that's for sure, but we also have very extensive plans for Europe, which there it's kind of a more, I would say, embryonic space for robotaxi. So this is also something that will be very exciting. And on the supervision side, with Porsche, which, by the way, not going to be only with Porsche, it's led by Porsche, but it is also planned to go to the rest of the VW brand luxury brands. Let's put it this way. This is also going to be interesting because then there also, again, scalability is going to be key. If you look today on the hands-off, eyes-on solutions, Tesla FSD-like type of systems. So we have Tesla in the US, probably very soon also China. So in terms of scalability, it's pretty good. Not yet in Europe, and we also have some Chinese competitors that are very active in this space, but again, they are very limited only to China. So what we expect to have is a solution that from day one will be able to operate in all major geos, US, Europe, China, and of course will be able to deliver this advanced driver experience. Now, the one thing that I also wanted to mention in this regard, one can ask, let's say, how come that a level 4 system is maturing or being deployed at this or roughly at the same time with a level 2++ system? They are not at the same level of complexity. So why they are, let's say, arriving at the same time? And the answer to that is that basically they are both optimizing different parameters. On the one hand, you have the level 4, the robotaxi system, which needs to deliver a very, very high mean time between failure. Let's say equal or better to a human mean time between failure. But on the other hand, it doesn't have the same cost constraints as the hands-off, eyes-on system. Now, hands-off, eyes-on system, what we call the supervision, this needs to or can deliver a lower MTBF, mean time between failure, because you, at the end of the day, have the driver in the loop. This is on the one hand, but on the other hand, it has to be much cheaper. So you have less sensors, you have less compute power, and this is really something that can fit into privately owned vehicles and can be delivered in mass production and also create volumes. So this is kind of what is being what do we expect, at least in the next 2 years, and yes, it's going to be very, very exciting, I think.
Just to pick up one of the points, Tzahi, that you made about scalability, you talked a lot about L2 plus up through L4, but you're still going to be supporting, the more basic ADAS features and functions down to front view cameras, correct?
Yes.
So your scalability is going all the way from kind of nuts and bolts of entry-level systems all the way up to robotaxis, which is one of the unique features of Mobileye's portfolio compared to other SoC suppliers.
Yeah, exactly. So when we deliver a solution, it doesn't matter if it's let's say supervision, the hands-off, eyes-on system, or level 3 system, what we call chauffeur. It is all the legacy ADAS stack, if you will, is already baked into the system and pretty much part of the overall software stack. We also have in some projects we have a configuration which separates the two realms, the ADAS from the AD, from the autonomous driving, for several reasons. But in any case, they are both delivered by Mobileye and the synergies for sure exist. For example, in the supervision system, we have the supervision system as we know it with two IQ6, and also inside the same vehicle there's also a legacy ADAS stack running on IQ5, which is there to serve the ADAS functions, and then later in more advanced SOPs, these two stack will be combined together. This additional camera and additional ADAS stack can also be used for fail operation to support the autonomous driving. So there are many different configurations where those two aspects really live together side by side, or really on the same SoC, and on the same software stack.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I think that, generally you would think that the more complexity or the challenging part of this is the self-driving part, right? Where the car is taking over the driving, and maybe the safety features are, sort of easy to do, but it's not the case. And you have to be careful as an OEM to make sure that you're not launching, self-driving features and, leaving yourself with, we could see cars that are very sophisticated in terms of their ability to drive themselves that might get 3 or 4 star safety ratings because the ADAS piece is not right. So I think it's an advantage of Mobileye because we can bring both at the same time.
Yeah, so really when people talk about end-to-end, I know that's one of those buzzwords that everybody uses the same language and it means different things in different contexts, but you're able to leverage in your software stack the learnings from basic ADAS features and carry that all the way through to self-driving applications, and vice versa. You can take learnings from self-driving and move those down back towards, not that it's going to go into an ADAS system necessarily, but the learnings are fungible. You can move them across all the spectrum.
I think that's right. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Tzahi, but I think that, that's a kind of another sort of wisdom of our compound approach, where we have a lot of kind of AI engines that are using end-to-end and transformer-based architectures to, to kind of create a baseline of perception and kind of path planning, but you still have, what I call legacy, engines that are, meant for kind of object detection, pedestrian detection, that are proven over, over years and years and millions of vehicles to, be robust, like never had a recall, these types of things. So I think that's why, we really need both sides of the equation to maintain like cutting edge, a handle on kind of cutting edge technology, but not lose, not just throw away kind of the legacy systems that are really proven at this point.
The 200 million cars running around with Mobileye solutions on them today, still, even if it's an older technology, you still can take the learnings from that and apply those to the first million self-driving cars.
And it's really challenging. Like it is not easy to support, a system that can get a 5-star rating under NCAP tests, because those tests, the criteria around those tests keep on getting more and more difficult, expand. So it's really challenging, and you're kind of seeing that with some automakers that have tried to kind of diversify their ADAS supply chain, have suffered in terms of like maybe a recall or maybe just not getting the same kind of quality of results on the safety tests, and then you're impacting your ability to sell cars. So I think it's a really good point.
This sounds like, I forget if it was last year's CES or the CES before that, where Amnon talked about moonshots. That you want to have kind of one moonshot instead of, well, here's a moonshot for L2, here's a moonshot for L2 plus, here's a moonshot for L4. That what you're talking about here is really the realization of that concept in practice.
I think totally. I mean, Tzahi, maybe you comment on, that it's a supportive point to what you were saying at the beginning, that these systems can be developed and launched at the same time, with much different, capabilities. because everything's coming from the same backbone. Do you want to make some comments about, the synergies between the different systems?
Yeah. So this is actually one of the, I would say, unique selling points of our product portfolio. It's really novel, I think, in a way that it's kind of, built as one product is built on the other. And if you go to our development group, I would say roughly 80% of the code that is being written, or maybe, I don't know, 70%. Don't catch me on the number, on the exact number. But the vast majority of code being written in Mobileye is a code that is being shared across all three platforms. I mean, the supervision, the hands-off, eyes-on, the chauffeur, the level 3 solution, and the robotaxi, the Mobileye Drive. So there, in terms of writing code or the software, significant synergy. But also from a hardware perspective, I mean, it's not since in Mobileye's design, the hardware and software are tightly coupled. You have the IQ and you have our software stack, which is being developed specifically to the IQ, kind of, Apple, iPhone kind of philosophy. We can, spend an hour just on that, but let's put it aside for a second. But since this is the case, you also have to back this strategy, to back it up also on the hardware aspect. And this is exactly what we're doing. So we have, for supervision, we have a solution which is running on 2 IQ6. For level 3, we add an additional IQ. We have 3 IQs. And for level 4, for the Mobileye Drive, it's 4 IQs. It's really scalable also in terms of hardware. The ECU design of level 4, level 2, level 3, sorry, level 2 is also very, very similar. If you look at the Mobileye Drive, for example, where you have 2 ECUs, each has 2 IQs on it. So each ECU, each board is basically identical to one supervision board. So there you also gain a lot from this synergy. And one more addition regarding the ADAS, and just want to give you an example of how we make use of the traditional, road hardened ADAS algorithms that we have, for example, AAB. So you can think of it, a system. Let's take the supervision system, for example. So for everything that is comfort driving, let's say up to we can say, I mean, I can give you a number up to -4 meters per square second. It's like mild to a little bit more than mild braking. So as long as you are in this spectrum, you can use a certain set of algorithms. Let's say, for example, those, end-to-end, all the fancy algorithms that we are developing. But once you need to conduct an emergency braking, let's say something that goes up to 1G, up to -9 meters per square second, then usually, again, for a level 2 plus system, you want to have more assurances that you really are doing the right thing and not just causing false -9 braking in the middle of the highway. You want to be more confident in this regard, and this is exactly where we are also using our AAB algorithms. So we kind of have internal algorithmic redundancy in order to make sure that the false rate is not high and we are actually doing what we need to do. So this is just one example how these two realms of ADAS and AV are living together side by side, and at the end of the day provide a more robust and joyful experience to the driver.
Great. Well, just to kind of pull the lens back a little bit. So we talked about, the next couple of years are kind of milestones in terms of the industry starting to launch L2 plus, L2 plus plus, maybe even L4 in production. From Mobileye's perspective, what's both the most exciting but also the most challenging about these upcoming launches?
I think that I will start with the most exciting. The most exciting thing is really to see this philosophy that I've just mentioned of scalability, and what you mentioned about doing those the incremental approach of not doing one moonshot, but instead building a product portfolio which is really really scalable. You can really see this materializing. We have SV62 supervision, sorry. We have the supervision, chauffeur, drive. They are all coming together, I would say, roughly at the same time, plus minus. And those synergies that at the beginning, they were on paper. And now you really see that this is the case. You see that a company like Mobileye, which is at the end of the day, not a big company in terms of people, and if you compare it to other companies in this space, can really bring to life 3 super complex projects with an extremely demanding OEM or OEMs all at the same time. This is only thanks to this approach. We could have never done it if those 3 product lines were completely isolated. This is only thanks to this synergy. Now, this brings me to the challenging aspect of it. This is something that also always comes to my mind, and actually now it's the first time that I'm sharing this insight with someone from the outside world. But if you think about it, Mobileye, what Mobileye is trying to do now with those 3 projects, or let's take only supervision, only the level 2 plus plus, very advanced product with Porsche. Mobileye is the only company in the world, I think, if I'm not mistaken, at least in the Western world, that is really developing such a complex system to a customer. So if you think of, let's say, Tesla, for example, Tesla doesn't have a customer. They're developing this to their own needs, to their own vehicles. This means that they have full control on when is it going to be launched, where is it going to be launched, how they want to tune the system, what requirements matter and what requirements don't matter, what kind of standards do they want to comply with, safety standards, quality standards. These are all things that at the end of the day affect your ability to execute and affect your ability to execute fast, and they have it all under their control. But we, Mobileye, as a supplier, with the supplier mindset, at the end of the day, we have a customer and we need to comply with what the customer is asking for. And these customers, they have their own standards, they have their own procedures, and we need to comply. And developing such a complex system in this environment is extremely hard. I can mention a few, safety standards that we need to comply with. ASPICE, if you've heard of it, for example, or other VW Group standards. These are all things that have direct implication on how fast you execute, for example. Now, we are dealing with a different set of challenges that other companies that are doing everything in-house, they don't have. If I also look at Chinese OEMs that develop things for their own needs, so the same applies to them. Now, if you take this supervision project as an example, I think it is safe to say, or let's say at least, I assume that in this traditional OEM tier one relationship, this is the most complex production program currently running in the world. I don't think that there's any other production program, with tier one and OEM, traditional tier one and OEM, with a specific SOP, concrete volume that is currently running. And this is something that I think only Mobileye can do. We have proven this in the past, with our execution track record. And it's also about, this supplier mindset of how you balance between, at the end of the day, your desire or your ability to get out on the road as fast as possible, and to comply with some other constraints that are derived from the customer, whether it's customization or safety standards, as I said, quality, things like that. These are all, we should not neglect this part. It's not just about having the right algorithms in place, running on a chip. It's not just bringing this to production in automotive standards. Has much more than what I've just said.
I think I want to pick up on this a little bit from more of an industry-wide perspective, because you asked about this being an exciting time,
Right,
because of a lot of launches upcoming. But I would say that there's really not a lot of launches upcoming of kind of advanced systems like we're talking about here.
okay,
I think that what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years is OEMs that believe eventually that they'll need to have more sophisticated self-driving systems to compete with other OEMs, but really having trouble kind of actually making decisions or deciding on a clear strategy. I think you can blame a lot of things. It started with kind of coming out of COVID and supply chain crisis, and then you had kind of ICE versus EV, right? If EVs are not going to be at the same glide path that was expected, you really need to go back in and replan your product portfolios as an OEM. Like, if you have advanced architectures that you want to put new technology into, if they were planned for only EV vehicles, then you probably need to change that, right? And so we've seen a lot of like kind of platform planning being pushed out from maybe like a 26 type of SOP to maybe a 28 SOP. You have kind of China, right? Like, how are the OEMs going to compete in China? Do we need a Chinese solution for China and a non-Chinese solution for everywhere else? All of these questions we really think led to some delays in probably understandable delays in making decisions on your AV strategy. I think we're seeing that sort of clarify now, and so we see a segment that we're calling surround ADAS as the next generation of driving assist, and we see this driven by a couple of different things. Number one is new regulations and safety rating compliance testing for 2028 that is getting to the point where it's really difficult to do with just a front camera. A lot of kind of side scenarios with pedestrians crossing traffic, that kind of drives a need for for side view cameras, and that drives a need for more processing power. In parallel, you do have competition from the Chinese in terms of hands-free highway driving at low cost, right? So you have BYD coming out and saying, $15,000 cars are going to have level 2+ on highway. These two drivers are creating traction around kind of a multi-camera, very cost-efficient system. We call it surround ADAS, where we believe that that's going to be kind of the next generation of standardized ADAS at some point. Waymo having success in kind of proving out consumer acceptance of driverless cars is creating a lot of interest for OEMs to participate in some way in the robotaxi space. And then I think every OEM in the world maybe doesn't feel like necessarily a sense of urgency, but understands that at some point they want to have an aspirational system for consumer-owned vehicles. Is that going to start with eyes on, like Tesla FSD, or do companies want to try to go straight to like a real kind of useful L3 system? That's maybe different OEMs have different feelings on it, but we're starting to see more clarification on kind of what segments each OEM wants to go into, and so it's exciting for us because we actually do feel like decisions are going to be made, over the next, 6 months to a year on kind of medium-term strategies by different OEMs. And, what we're very, very grateful for is that Volkswagen Group made these decisions, a year and a half ago, and, wants to participate in the robotaxi space. They're doing that through the VW ID Buzz under their kind of commercial vehicle subsidiaries. They want to have aspirational systems for, point A to point B, eyes on driving everywhere. They're doing that through our supervision system. They want to have, a kind of eyes off real L3 up to 130 kph. They're doing that through our chauffeur system. And then for the mass market, in order to comply with new safety ratings and give consumers like a really nice kind of hands-free experience on highways, they're doing that through our surround ADAS system. So the ability to kind of develop these products starting a year and a half ago for launch over the next year, makes us feel like we're going to have real solutions that are developed for new customers that are making decisions a little bit later than VW, but are making decisions. So I think it's going to be exciting to kind of see where OEMs sort of like settle out in terms of what brands, what price points get which types of systems. Where do we want to play in the robotaxi space? Are we going to own the vehicles? Are we going to just produce the vehicles? Like there's a lot of exciting decisions that OEMs are facing today, and we're very much hoping that they go, they create a strategy and kind of move forward with it.
So you brought up 2 points there I want to follow up on. One is, correct me if I'm wrong, the lessons that you're learning from VW, you can apply those to other OEMs. It's no longer the case that OEMs see this is my IP. You do it for me, and then you've got to protect that. You can't take any of that to my competitors. You're starting to see the lessons that you learned there. I'm sure VW is going to have some proprietary portion of that, but you really can take the lessons from that and reapply those to other engagements with other OEMs.
Yeah. Tzahi should follow up, but I think that VW feels like the development of these products can create differentiation and advantage for them because they're going to be early to market rather than others. I think that one of the reasons they chose Mobileye was they saw the synergies between these different products, and that really there's a lot of kind of reuse of technology that maybe the vision system doesn't need to be validated 4 times because you're essentially using the same kind of vision system. I think they also, I'm very kind of would give kudos to VW to kind of believe that they can adopt core technology from Mobileye, but then also customize on top of that and create like a user experience that is unique to VW. Tzahi should probably fill in, but I think that's right. I think the core technology is our IP, and the development of VW is helping us to kind of industrialize, what.
Right.
If you're doing it just on your own in your labs, it's not going to be as robust as doing it with a customer, right? So that core technology, we benefit from the VW programs, and other OEMs will benefit as well. But we're enabling also a lot of customization on top by the automaker. I don't know if you have anything to add, Tzahi.
It's a general trend in the industry, but we really see how OEMs are looking for working directly with the technology supplier as a tier 1. They see this collaboration model as more agile. They have more control, and it's more efficient. And also for us, I mean, we at the end of the day, want less cooks in the kitchen. But I think that the bottom line, these are all just I would even say nice to have things. I mean, they at the end of the day chose us because they believe in the technology. And this is at the end of the day what matters. I mean, as a starting point, you have to believe that really your partner has the best technology or the technology that fits to your needs, and then anything else comes on top of that.
The other point, Dan, that you brought up that I wanted to touch on was EV. Yeah, we've been seeing a slowdown in the EV adoption rate, certainly outside of China. And for the past X number of years, we've been seeing EV as kind of the forcing function that, hey, for the traditional OEMs especially, I go to a blank sheet of paper, so I might as well re-architect the entire electrical system. And now that we're seeing that EVs are slowing down, ICE vehicles are going to stick around longer. Are you seeing that EV slowdown is just pushing out some of the introduction dates? Are you seeing that some of the OEMs are saying, well, if I'm having to keep ICE around longer, I need to apply some of those architectural lessons that I was going to apply to EV in ICE because it's not, the runway's longer. And therefore you're going to start seeing AV showing up on ICE vehicles maybe sooner than or not sooner, because we didn't envision it differently now because of the EV slowdown.
I think that's right. I think that there was a lot of there was a view that you could sort of just run your internal combustion platforms out, for cash, right? Let's run them out as long as we can. We're not going to upgrade powertrains. We're not going to put, consolidated architectures, OTA into ICE platforms because EV is the future and kind of, your point about EV being simpler. So it's easier to do it there. I think we're seeing that change where OEMs are, number one, not as, I think needing to more the replanning process of OEMs, I think involved a couple of things. It involved, okay, well, we can probably take a little bit more time with these sort of aspirational, cutting edge EV architectures that we're planning, because, they're probably not going to generate as much volume in the next couple of years as we thought. So let's push those out. But let's also make sure that we're adding OTA, features and other kind of new technologies into our ICE platforms. And I think that this is why, we saw a bit of a push out in some of the decision making on AV, because the OEMs had to figure out what they were doing with their overall portfolio first. But yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more advanced architectures into, plug-in hybrid, powertrains and ICE as well.
So zonal domain, maybe even centralized architectures, where we had modeled those as kind of being not in lockstep, but kind of moving sympathetically with EVs. Now there's going to be a decoupling, and you may see new architecture showing up on ICE vehicles depending on the OEM's rollout strategy now for when they're going to change their propulsion systems.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, because we'd forecasted, 2030, about 20% of the ADC systems were going to be central architecture, but it's only 2% were going to be a single SoC.
Okay.
That looks like that's kind of good news for all the SoC suppliers, because it means the runway is going to be longer for the SoCs. They no longer have to get to that SoC. They can do an entire system within a single SoC. Does that still, the timeline might be changing, but does that still kind of feel like the general trajectory?
I think it's I think it's a complicated question, right? I think our view, like we think more in terms of, okay, there's an overall pool of vehicles that Mobileye has technology inside, right?
Okay.
And we want that pool of vehicles to be as big as
Sure.
possible, obviously. Right now it's about 35 million cars a year, ADAS adoption. There's still opportunities in, regions like India and Latin America to grow that. Maybe we get some new customers, but the volume piece is not as important to us as what is that pie? How is that pie split, right?
Okay.
Is that pie right now is basically 100% single chip, single front camera. Maybe there's a couple of radars, like ADAS systems that are intended really just to create safety and 5-star ratings. How will that change over time is really important to our company. And, as we kind of look at, RFQs that we're responding to from different OEMs, like you get a sense of like what the OEM is planning in terms of different like ADAS segments. I talked about the surround ADAS segment. So, if it's correct that you really won't be able to get a 5-star rating in 2028, 2029 without, 5 cameras around the vehicle and multiple radars, then that means that, a portion of our volume will be one IQ6 high in an ADC, right? Because if you're going to have 5 cameras, you're not going to put a chip in each one, right? So you're going to have a centralized. So for us, we see RFQs that are in the 30 to 35% of an OEM's volume,
Okay.
right? Like, eventually, right? It's like within autos, nothing changes overnight, but it's like, maybe we launch in 27 and by 2029, 2030, you have like 30, 35% of your volume is this, kind of multi-camera system. Supervision, like an L2++, like to compete with Tesla FSD, maybe that's 8 to 10% of an OEM's volume, and now you've got like a bigger ECU with 2 IQ6 highs. Chauffeur, which is L3, is I think there's still a lot of questions in the OEM's minds about like, can anyone do that, right? Can you create a system where you can safely tell the driver you're out of the loop, you can do whatever you want until we get you back in the loop? Like that's super challenging, right? And so we have a production program with Audi that we're very excited about. But I think that it's a leap of faith on Audi that we can get there, right? And we are very confident that we can, but that's going to start fairly low volume. So who knows what the eventual 2030. And then robotaxi is a small volume vehicle. But I think when you think about like surround ADAS and supervision, maybe making up 40 to 50% of an OEM's portfolio. Not every OEM is going to have that, but those are domain controller type of systems, right? But it's the question of whether you're going to have one domain controller for the entire vehicle or 4 or 5, like the Neue class, right? It's 4 domain controllers, body and chassis, infotainment, ADAS and safety, and then I think like, HVAC type of comforts, so we feel like that's probably more of the path for OEMs, at least in the next kind of couple of platform generations, rather than taking, 100 100 MCUs today or microcontrollers today and consolidating it all to one. So I don't know if that answers your question. We just don't see a lot of kind of asks for single SoC systems by OEMs, at least today. Tzahi, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, again, this maybe go back a couple of years that Mobileye in one of the roundtables was making the point that, ADAS is different. You look at all the other domains, ADAS is different. And therefore, you're trying to squeeze it into a single central compute that's competing with throughput with your entertainment system, door locks, seat control, that sounds good, but in practice, you never want the controller to take its eye off of keeping you
Yeah.
safe.
I think it's easy to say my domain is different,
Yeah.
right? But I think there's real logic behind it, right? Like like in aviation, right? You need to have these safety systems, like redundancy within the safety systems. They probably have to have like a different robustness level. Like if your infotainment system goes down and you get a blue screen while you're, going
Yeah.
70 miles on the highway, it's no big deal. And so, I think like that's what we're hearing from customers too, is that's maybe the last step of consolidation, if at all, rather than like an initial step.
Yeah, and that
I can
it
also
seems to
tell you
make
that from an execution perspective, it's also much more complex for the OEM to have many functions delivered by the same SoC. Sorry. So if I'm taking, let's say, the projects that we currently have, so you have along across the life of the program until you reach an SOP. So you have several integration steps, where in each integration step, sorry, the car line, or let's say the platform manager, has to get deliverables from several ECU providers or from several software providers. So as long as those ECUs are separate, they are not dependent on one another. So one can deliver, and you can integrate the content into the vehicle and move forward. Once everything is running on the same chip, then you're creating a dependency that presumably you might end up with a more complex process or complex system rather than a simple one. So this is just my perspective. Nevertheless, we could see, sometime maybe in the future, where it will be the case. Everything will run on this particular zonal computer, and then at the end of the day, OEMs will master the production process to match this architecture, because at the end of the day, money is king, and or cost is king, and if this architecture is cheaper, so this is what they will have to comply with. But yet to be seen.
Yeah. Well, I've got two more questions I want to make sure we get to. First is, with Mobileye's Intel relationship. Intel's been in the news for various reasons of late. You guys are separate from them, but does that have any lingering effect given their stake in Mobileye at this point, or is it just more of a curiosity that is going on?
Yeah, I think it has an effect in some ways, right? It doesn't have any effect on our ability to execute our, technology development and production programs, because we ran independently even when we were 100% owned by Intel, and we've run even more independently, since the spin out. We don't rely on there was never really any crossover between kind of Mobileye's automotive business and Intel's kind of automotive aspirations. And so I think from a ability to execute, there's no impact at all. I think that they still own 80% of our shares, so from a stock market perspective, it's actually a pretty big overhang on our stock that investors don't have visibility on how quickly Intel will want to sell down that stake.
Right.
So the more they talk about divesting non-core assets and things like that, it kind of makes investors nervous. But I think we have a really good relationship with Intel management. They know us, like there's multiple board members at mobile, from Intel at Mobileye, so they kind of understand the opportunities in front of us. So everything is, kind of very, very smooth in terms of like the relationship with Intel, but I think the impact that it has is basically a kind of an investment case, sort of a modest negative for us.
Yeah, and there's enough other variables out in that same sphere that make investors nervous right now. So the Intel thing is not what's keeping them up. There's other things.
There's other things, but it would be good to have more clarity.
Yeah. The last thing I want to ask you is really just kind of give you guys an open forum to talk about the sensor products that you've introduced, that you're supporting, also the occupant monitoring, driver monitoring systems that you recently announced. So, what are the points that you want the audience to leave with in terms of, Mobileye's breadth of products beyond SoCs and self-driving, which is where I think, 85% of our focus ends up being.
Do you want to take imaging radar, Tzahi?
Maybe you start and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that one thing that we're seeing, more of, and I think it actually does fit into ECU consolidation desires by the OEMs, is we're seeing more OEMs like look for a one-stop shop for their ADAS programs, and that doesn't mean it's like only one company, because maybe somebody's producing the domain controller, but in terms of a technology provider to be directly in front of the customer, the OEM, it's something that we're seeing more of, and the ability to put different functions, like obviously, with any system, you're going to have the perception software and kind of the driving policy software, on a single SoC, although it's not always the case. But, having like the driving functions on that SoC, having the DMS software, at least on the same ECU as kind of the core ADAS SoC, parking software. So consolidating, all kind of safety and ADAS functions onto a single ECU is something that we're seeing. And, it makes sense for, to put the DMS, on that compute. And, we've been asked by customers to develop something. I think there's also the ability to integrate, what the sensors are seeing, externally with what the sensors are seeing internally, to create a more robust, to create more robust safety. Because if you understand that the driver is looking away when you may be more you may take a more aggressive approach in towards of taking over the car and braking, then if the driver, you could tell the driver was very attentive, you may be like a little bit less apt to take over, because your view is that like the driver will step in, you know what I'm saying? So I think you can.
So can I play that back? So if the ADC is trying to make a decision on, should I let the driver do this or should I do this? If it's got DMS capabilities built into that loop, then it can say, if the driver's looking to the side, I'll take over.
Yeah.
If the driver's focused on the task in front of them, the driver can handle this. That becomes another variable in.
It becomes another variable in like a consumer pleaser, because nobody wants to like, hey, I know that car is out there, right? I know I'm like crossing over the yellow line. Don't mess with me. But it's like, if you're looking, in the back seat at your kid and you're drifting over, you're going to be very thankful, right?
Yeah.
So, you can use it to kind of like make for a more robust. It's a subtle point.
Yeah.
Tzahi?
I think also specifically for the imaging, or let me put it this way, just to refer to the first point that you made then. Again, from an OEM perspective, managing those multiple supplier programs, it's a nightmare. There's no other way to describe it, really. I mean, I see now how we are, dependent on content coming from this and content coming from there. It's just, one big chaos, managed chaos, but still chaos. So this is why they are striving for this one-stop shop approach. And also from our perspective, from an execution perspective, the more vertically integrated you are at the end of the day, the simpler it gets. Going back to the point that I made earlier, that Mobileye is really, the first one that is doing it with this OEM tier 1 approach. On the other hand, the only ones that, let's say, players in this field that were successful thus far are only players that are vertically integrated. If you look at Waymo and Tesla, for example, complete vertical integration. So this is why it's so important. And of course, when you look at the imaging radar as an example, the point to what Dan said about the EMS, it's valid, but also with respect to the imaging radar, putting aside the fact that this is really, best of breed sensor, really amazing. The fact that this is really tightly coupled with our system. Our algorithms are being developed along the way together with the sensor, with developers sitting side by side, literally next door from one another. And combined with the fact that, let's say, me as a project manager, I can control both development streams together. I have full transparency. No one is hiding nothing from me. I am not hiding anything from the customer, of course. The customer has a single point of contact to everything. This is priceless. Again, this is even without talking about the huge technological benefit that there is to this specific sensor. We really think that, in order to get to those very high level of MTBF needed for unsupervised driving, using this sensor is this kind of sensor, I would say, is almost a must.
Mhm.
Great. Well, appreciate your guys' time today. Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got. So thanks to both of you for joining Autology.
Thanks a lot, Phil.
It was a pleasure.
So thank you to all the listeners for tuning in as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode at our autology@spglobal.com email address. You can find out much more at autotechinsights.spglobal.com. Don't forget to hit all the subscribe, follow, and like buttons to stay on track with the latest podcasts. And we look forward to you joining us again in the next episode. Bye for now.